Yep, looks like it's live.
Yes. Yep. Okay. It's live. Hi. So, welcome. Thank you for tuning in. So, I'm Hannah. I am part of this year's AYAA Aerospace Futures Committee, and I'm here with Paddy Neumann, and we're going to be answering all of your questions talking about communication and soft skills, how that can play into your career and why it's so important, some of the stuff you can also do to sort of help build those. So like I said, I'm Hannah. I am a third year mechatronic engineering and maths student at the University of Adelaide. And I'm currently interning with Mariota at Lot 14, where I have met Paddy. Paddy has started his own company in propulsion. I'm sure you guys already have heard of him. But if you want to talk about a little bit what you can.
Sure, no worries. G'day, I'm Paddy Neumann. I'm Chief Scientist and co-founder at Neumann Space. We founded Neumann Space in part to answer the question of, so what are you going to do when you finish your PhD, Paddy? My PhD was on plasma spacecraft propulsion systems, looking at a pulsed cathodic arc plasma source and seeing how well it would work as a spacecraft propulsion system. The system works like a combination of a camera flash and an arc welder. You strike an electrical arc, evaporate, ionize, and accelerate cathode material, which is streamed downrange, and that's the exhaust for your thruster. The results from our PhD were rather exciting. We delivered quite a decent amount of thrust with very high efficiency, and we believe that this could be an excellent propulsion solution for small spacecraft, including CubeSats, and we know we can also scale to higher levels of power rather, because that's the same sort of power level that the system I used at UCID operated at. So we've got a nice little company working here in Adelaide, but I'll be talking more about some of the other skills I've developed along the way. Some of them helped me to get where I am today. Others are just generally useful for a lot of things in life generally and in your career in particularly.
Awesome. So yeah, obviously all of that is really interesting, but we'd like to make sure that the focus for today's event is going to be on communications and soft skills. So it'd be really great if you keep all of your questions to sort of that topic. So I suppose going on from that, obviously a lot of effort and it would have been quite difficult making the transition from honours project through to PhD project through to business. How have your communications and soft skills, so the communication and soft skills sort of helped you in that process? And how, like, otherwise, like, do you reckon Neumann Space would be as successful
Nope,
as it is?
not without it. It's all well and good to have the best thing since sliced bread, but if you can't tell someone why it's important, no one's gonna want to really help you out with anything. You have to be able to talk about what's important in a clear, concise fashion. You've got to be able to not dumb it down, but simplify it. Be able to talk to non-specialists in a clear way that is simple, but not patronizing. No one likes being patronized. It's nasty. Don't do that. No one likes that person. Don't be that person. It's a fine balance often, and it's one that I worked on quite a lot in high school. For my electives, I'd often pick drama because A, it's fun, and B, I enjoyed it, and C, it's a great way of developing those communication skills, especially for public speaking. Stereotypically, engineers are terrible at public speaking. There's the old joke, how do you know you're talking to an extroverted engineer? The extroverted engineer is looking at your shoes when they're talking to you. Yeah, there are a number of people out there who do resemble that. It's okay if that's you, but if you need to tell someone why your idea, why your invention, why your development, why your work is important, you need to work on that. And this is a skill just like any other skill. It can be learnt, and after it is learned, it needs to be practiced.
Okay, yeah. I suppose then, other than obviously joining drama classes and that sort of stuff, what have you done to sort of develop these skills, and how have you sort of helped continue to keep them up?
Yeah. So, as I said, drama in high school, for pretty much everyone here at Aerospace Futures, that boat sailed. On the other hand, there are amateur drama societies at various universities. You can join your university's dramatic society. Sure, there'll be a whole bunch of really cringy theatre kids there who want to, who while they're doing an undergraduate arts degree, prior to applying for one of the academies of performing arts, be it NIDA in Sydney, be it WAPA in Perth, whoever, they're really focused on their thing. What you're looking at is skills to develop while you're doing something else. So sure, some of the amateur drama might be great for that. Theatre sports is also something you can do. If you're not really comfortable with doing that, there are a lot of things you can do that might not be necessarily on campus. Places like Toastmasters, which is like it sounds like, people stand up and deliver toasts. You are given the chance to prepare. You can read off a script if you're not comfortable memorizing it, or just having dot points and going extemporaneously. You can do poetry slams. You can go to like a cafe somewhere. Admittedly, look, this is all going to be some things that are going to be really hard to do with the current COVID situation. I'll get onto some things you can do at home later on, but for public speaking, you need to be able to get used to the fact that there is an audience out there. If you do, I studied at the University of Sydney. I was heavily involved with the Engineering Students Review. If anyone's here from USyd, good to know that the game's still going sometimes. And yeah, sure, there might be an audience out there of a few hundred people, but there's bright lights in your eyes, you can't really see them. At a poetry slam, you know they're there. They can see you, you can see them. It's generally going to be a fairly sympathetic audience, though, at a cafe's poetry night. And the great thing is, it doesn't have to be your poems. You can grab whatever favorite book of poetry you've had. Shakespeare's sonnets, the collected poetry of Edgar Allan Poe. Hell, you go to a goth night and you read The Raven, you're going to have a good time. You just need to get up there and deliver something. Work on your delivery, your eye contact, your scansion, the way you change your voice, the way flow works in with syllables and where the stress goes as you go along the line. All of these skills that people assume you pick up, but nobody really tells you about. You can find books on them. Some of them in weird and wonderful places. For people with who want to go back to first principles and try and get from the source, I do recommend Rhetorica ad Herennium. We don't actually know who wrote it, but we're pretty sure it was Cicero in the 1st century BC, as a book as a series of letters to a fellow called Herennius on rhetoric being the art of public speaking. We don't have the letter Herennius wrote to the author, but from the start of the book, it's a case of, "Hi, Herennius, thanks for your letter. So it says you've got a job as magistrate in this district somewhere out in Gaul, and that's great to hear. You're an up-and-coming good Roman citizen of a noble family. You're doing the right thing with public service, and you're going to go be a judge. And you mentioned you need to know how to do your public speaking. Here's how you do it." Described in beautifully clear language. If you read Latin, I do not, but there are numerous translations. If English is not your first language, but it's one of the European tongues, you will be able to find it translated into your mother tongue. If it's one of the more major non-European languages, I'm certain it will have a translation, at least in part, somewhere on the internet. Try Wikipedia as a source.
Yeah, I imagine At the moment, it's a little bit difficult, obviously, to join all of those like drama groups and all that. So a book sounds nice, actually. Yeah. We've got a question from the audience here. How do you practice communicating technical information in a concise manner?
Right, yeah. Whew. Yeah, it's toughy. It's a good question. Bloody good question. Thank you for it. You need to strike the balance. It's something that the coders call it rubber ducking. If you have a problem with some code you're writing, your program's compiling but not in the right way, or it's doing something weird, or it's just not compiling, what's often done is you hold a little yellow rubber duck and you talk to the rubber duck and you go through everything in the code, and by explaining it to the rubber duck, you'll go, how did I miss that? And often find your problem. If you can rubber duck your technical content, and it can just be to rubber duck, it could be to your dog. Your dog would love the attention. It could be to yourself in the mirror. The fact that you're getting this out and you're voicing it and you're having to listen to yourself do it means that you have to pay attention to what you're actually doing, and you will be able to determine whether or not you're waffling, whether or not you're padding too much, whether or not you've just got too much of these verbal shorthands that we all put in around things, know what I mean? To just make conversation flow a little bit better. But if you want to be crisp, clear, and concise, you've got to remove.
Yeah, I can imagine my dog would actually really love that. He would love the attention. I suppose it's all well and good to talk about how you can develop these skills. At university, we're constantly told, go do extracurriculars, go do this. This is really important. It would be great to sort of, I don't know, go into a little bit more of how these skills have actually helped you as you're moving through your career.
Sure. So public speaking all the way. Those of the audience at the University of Sydney may have gone to see some of the more recent engineering reviews. It weren't like that back when I were a lad. Oh no, it were bigger, it were. In that we'd often be able to sell out theatres of 600 people. So after you've delivered a terrible joke that's an absolutely awful and horrendous pun to 600 engineering students who have been enjoying themselves at the tavern previously, and they're not shy about how bad that joke was, after that, no audience makes you nervous. None. I don't feel nervous when I'm doing public speaking because I've seen a whole bunch of audiences. I've seen them of various different qualities. I've seen them happy. I've seen them sad. I've seen them angry. I've seen them bored. I've seen them nodding off at conferences. For those of you who have not presented at a conference and haven't heard the very, very polite, frankly, sir, I think you're talking out of your ass type questions, that environment can be very politely intimidating. I don't feel that. I don't have an issue with it because I've done enough drama, enough acting, enough public speaking that I've done it to all kinds of audiences. One of the part-time jobs I used to have, I used to be in the Kickstart Physics Outreach Program at the University of Sydney School of Physics, which I believe is still running. If there's any students from the University of Sydney here who'd like to practice and develop their public speaking and teaching skills and get paid handsomely for this, this is a good thing. Get in touch with the School of Physics Outreach Department. Doing this allowed me to pay rent while I was doing my master's, as well as giving me the experience of teaching groups of Year 12 students experiments relevant to their syllabus by taking them around the second year teaching lab in the physics building at USyd. So this was, you got 2.5, maybe 3 hours to to do 5 experiments. If you've got a double physics class from a large high school, you might have 50 students around, and so it's very tightly timed, the choreographing to go around all the various stations there. You need to cover very complex concepts in a way that you yourself understand to a greater depth than can be really taught to a high school student, because the high school students don't yet have the background in calculus and mathematics to fully grok it. But you still have to be able to talk about how superconductors do what they do, why Hertz did what he did to demonstrate what he did demonstrate with radio waves, whatever. You've got to be able to get this clear and concise, and in a way that the students learn. You've got to get the message across. And to do this, you've got to be able to read the room, you've got to be able to know your audience, you've got to be willing, if need be, to ask questions to establish what your audience already knows, what they're curious about, and therefore what you have to tell them in order to make sure that this is a good instance of communication.
Suppose just building on needing to read the audience. Obviously, at the moment, a lot of this sort of thing is going online. Have you had much experience having to do presentations online, and how have you sort of been struggling a little bit, or if you have figured out some tips for doing these presentations online and being able to read the virtual room?
Yeah, it's really hard. I've had a little bit of experience. It's kicked off with I've done teleconferences, conference calls and the like, so you have downsampled voices but no body language, no facial expressions. Right now, going live via Facebook, we're seeing ourselves, unlike, say, doing a Discord group chat or a Zoom group call, where we'd be able to see effectively a Brady Bunch worth of people in various different squares, and you'd be able to get, with a little bit of time lag, sure, but you'd be able to get the non-verbal cues, furrowed brows of "I'm just not sure about this." You'd be able to see people nodding in understanding or looking quizzical as if they're puzzling something out. It's harder to do these sorts of webinar broadcasts that we're doing now because you don't get that feedback from the audience. So you've got to try and feed it back in. You've got to have in your mind's eye a picture of what your audience is, what they need to know. You've got to prepare a little bit more to do that little bit of research on your audience. Thankfully, I've been to a couple of aerospace futures conferences before, so I've got a bit of an idea about what you all are at, what sort of good parts you are in your journey through engineering and the broader STEM environment, as well as thinking back to how I was when I was your age, and at my first aerospace futures, I was thinking, if they'd had one of these when I was a lad, I probably would have gone and got a whole lot out of it, because these sorts of things are awesome and very, very useful, because you don't know that you don't know something unless it gets pointed out to you sometimes. Yeah.
I'm learning that in my internship, that's for sure. I suppose you could also apply that to, like, when you've got a huge audience and you've got a bright, blinding light. Can't see the audience.
Yeah.
Can do a similar thing.
Yeah.
Got another question from the audience here. How do you go about talking about all these soft skills on a resume? Like, you've got normally 1 to 2 pages. How can you talk about these quite sort of out there, not quite this is what I've done concepts, and getting that across in a really effective way that gets...
There's always a temptation to do buzzword bingo and do intelligent, self-motivated hominid with a passion for interpersonal communications. And people go, well, that's your opening paragraph. Yeah, sure, no worries. You're intelligent, you're doing an engineering degree, that's redundant. You're self-motivated, well, you sent me this, yeah, that's redundant. In interpersonal communications, that's what a resume is, that's redundant. So it's basically a whole bunch of noise and no signal. The signal you can give is by telling people what you've done, and that's often what a resume is for, what it boils down to. There's the section that gets included for hobbies, extracurricular activities, and the like. So on that one, that's where you put the whole being involved in amateur drama, helped organize this small poetry event, these sorts of things. Being faculty representative for your year is another one, because that way you've got to talk to the other members of your cohort, as well as being in the, mildly to moderately intimidating environment of being in the room with most of the lecturers and professors that have been giving all the various courses for that year. And you've got to be able to stand up on your own 2 feet and say, look, Professor X was doing an excellent job. Professor Y, you need to work on your communication skills. You need to work on making sure your slides are clear because you can hardly read them. Professor Z, we realize this is your third language, but you often are confusing in the way that you put in conversational shorthand. It muddies it can muddy the conversation when you have 3 different things that are referred to as this thing, that thing, or like this, like that, without clear references. By the way, all these examples I've seen in lectures while I've been an undergraduate. No doubt you have as well. These are some of them examples of what not to do when you want to be clear, concise, crisp, and communicative.
Yeah, I suppose, I don't know, it's hard to get those across, and it'd be so easy to just waffle on your resume. And it's a good practice of being concise in your writing as well. Yeah, so we've had another sort of a bit out there question. We're wondering if you could demonstrate your communication skills and sort of demonstrate how you pitch Neumann Space to investors, just because there's a lot of people in our audience who obviously have really bright ideas and don't really know how to pitch them. So or aren't feeling too confident. So it'd be great to see an example.
Okay. There are a bunch of pitches that people talk about. There's the archetypal 10-slide deck, which is you have 10 PowerPoint slides. They each have a purpose, and you've got 10, maybe 8 to 12 minutes to be able to talk about it, and you're done. Not going to do that. Haven't got that prepared. Never really cared for that one. And there's a bunch of investors that I've had a chat with networking at conferences that have seen that too many times, and they want to be told a story. And that story can go anywhere from what's referred to as the t-shirt pitch. What's the really important thing that you can just put on a t-shirt and walk around wearing that gives the most important thing you can convey on this one? And then there's your 60-second pitch, 90-second pitch, your 10-minute slide deck. I've gone all the way through to basically doing my thesis defense lecture with added stuff on top, and that was an entire 3 hours. So what style of pitch is determined by your audience. So you need to do your research. You need to know what they're expecting. But to give an example for the 60-second one, Neumann Space is developing a compact electric propulsion system capable of giving small satellites, especially cube satellites, sufficient maneuver authority to permit constellation deployment within a time frame which is attractive to owner-operators of CubeSat constellations. We do this using a pulsed cathodic arc plasma source, which works using hybrid methodology. It works sort of like a hybrid between an electric welder and a camera flash. The welder part is when it strikes an arc off the cathode surface and sends plasma downrange. The plasma is created from the metallic cathode. The camera flash is the fact that this is not a continuous flow thruster. It operates in short, sharp bursts. The more pulses per second, the higher your time average thrust, but each pulse is its own thing. It's a separate, discrete event, and so the more pulses per second does not affect the efficiency of our system. Because this is an electric propulsion system, it will be highly efficient, but it will never give you the huge amount of thrust you need to get your rocket off the Earth's surface. This is purely an in-space propulsion system, but it will permit CubeSat owner-operators to maintain their CubeSat in a given orbit for longer and to move them to orbits more favorable for operations. Together, we can work together to make the world a bigger place and help more people do more things in space more efficiently. And there we go.
That sounds practiced. It sounds like you've done it a few times.
Oh boy. Yep.
I suppose, when you're having to do these pitches, or just in general, talking at conferences, talking to other people within your company, talking to students, all these sorts of things, how do you tailor what you're talking? How do you tailor what you're talking about and adapt the level of technical stuff that you're talking about?
Yeah. With a non-technical or semi-technical audience, you can be vague. You can use imperfectly defined terms like efficiency, but you can use it a couple of times just then. I didn't tell you what efficiency. I didn't tell you mass efficiency. I didn't tell you power efficiency. I didn't tell you volumetric efficiency. I didn't say anything about which efficiency I was using. With electric propulsion systems, it is almost invariably the mass efficiency. If I'm talking to a technical audience, especially propulsion specialists, I'll say specific impulse, which is the measure of how much momentum change you get from a given unit weight of propellant. It's often referred to as bounce per ounce. It's like miles per gallon, but for spacecraft. That's an example. You tailor the terms you use and how you define them if necessary based on your audience.
I suppose then there's always these instances where you could have a range. You could have someone who has never even thought about the fact that you could put propulsion on a satellite. And they're only, the closest they've seen to somewhat aerospace propulsion is seeing a rocket go up in a YouTube video.
I may have seen Star Wars.
Yeah. But then you could also, in that exact same audience, have established researchers in the field who would get bored if you were just tailoring. So how could you, work to balance both and get both engaged?
The way I do it is I work to bring up the people who haven't got the background. I define terms. I define them in a fairly simple way. I throw out some numbers that are representative of things that might have numerical values to them, like, again, specific impulse. If I've got people in the audience who had no idea what it was, no idea that you could even put propulsion in spacecraft, I say, okay, you put different ones on, they'll all perform differently because they're all different technologies. Here's one of the metrics you use to compare them. Here's why it's important. Here are some numbers for some of the main technologies. Here's where ours fits in. And the people who had no idea that you could do this have been nodding and going, oh, that sounds nice. That's an interesting number. The people who are specialists in the field go, yes, that number. Yes. How big is it? How much power does it take? Those sorts of, the specialists will often ask the insightful questions. They will try and take control of the direction of the conversation a little bit, but not try and dominate it, because if they dominated it, they wouldn't get their questions asked. So you get a little bit for free, as long as and they'll be listening and nodding along to you, helping to bring up the rest of the audience. And no doubt grinning because they've had to do it themselves before enough times. We all know how this one goes. If you're a specialist and someone asks, so what do you do? That sounds fascinating. Can you explain it to me? Example we were discussing earlier of a pizza was programmable logic controllers. No doubt you've had to explain how they work to people as a mechatronics student.
Yeah.
How do they work? What are they used for? What are they good for? Why do we use them? All these are really good questions. And you got to have some canned answers for when people ask you these at parties, you know?
Yeah. It's almost sometimes good to be asked those questions because it's so easy to just forget the basics.
Yes.
And actually realize what you're actually supposed to be doing.
As a small plug, the International Space University is based in Strasbourg, but has a Southern Hemisphere summer studies program every year at the University of South Australia's Mawson Lakes campus. If you're a South Australian-based student, you can qualify for a scholarship. I have no idea if it'll be running this coming summer because COVID. But that's how all the lectures are pitched. There will be people in the audience who will be a specialist in that field. There will also be a whole lot of people who are not specialists in that field. And this is great because it is helping to broaden a lot of people's horizons about the breadth of what space is. As an example, I've given the propulsion lecture for the last couple of years at the Southern Hemisphere gig, and the talks around me, there has been one PhD student, I believe his PhD has been awarded, talking about celestial mechanics, orbital mechanics, and conic sections, and how these all fit together. And after the first few slides, most of the non-maths people are totally at sea, because this is one of the few things you can't simplify that much and still have it being meaningful. Others, such as the aerospace medicine, those can be simplified well enough so that the non-specialists are following it very well, but you can also throw in some interesting bits and pieces so that the specialists learn something new also. It's that fine balance of how things go together that's very, very important to get right when you're doing technical communications of complex subjects. When you're doing these sorts of things to a general audience, you can either be vague or wrong, pick a mix of the two. If you're needing to do this to a small group of people, you can take the time to properly define your terms, to get your vagueness as low as possible, and to hone in on as much of the truth as you can in the time available.
Yeah, I feel like that just is going to come from practice almost, knowing the right piece of information to throw in there that will get everyone thinking. Yeah.
Talk to your dog, talk to people at parties.
Yeah.
People
at parties normally have a lot of inquisitive questions. Yeah. So, yeah.
After a couple of beers, you get some really interesting questions out of people that you go, you know what, I never thought of that. I think, and then you have a nice conversation about this. Yeah.
Lots of interesting stuff happens at that point. So we've been focused a lot on verbal communication skills. So it would be great to sort of get your ideas of how you can practice your written communication skills, because obviously as engineers, a lot of what we're going to potentially be doing is writing reports, making sure that those are effective and concise. And
So this one is always an interesting one. I'm originally from Western Australia. When I was going through high school, the way the system worked was, in order to do the maximum number of mathematics and science courses at high school, you had to do the top level English course, which was English literature. So we were taught how to write, how to deconstruct texts, how to have a look through various themes, and then write essays upon this. This is not a particularly useful skill for a practicing engineer. The deconstructing problems, yes, same mindset. Take away all the fluff, get down to nuts and bolts, have a look at what's actually going on there. Writing about it is a different skill set. Some of the same hints and tips are applicable to all of them. In a technical report, don't use the first person. It's never an I until we get to the recommendations and conclusions. It's a we, or it is found that, or it is apparent that. These are the way that these things get done. Also, active voice versus passive voice is something that needs to be covered. It often isn't taught in high school or primary school English because it's one of those interesting grammatical things that English does a lot of, and you can also find in some other languages. In English, verbs can have an active form and a passive form, and how you construct your sentence determines whether it's the active voice or the passive voice. The cat sat on the table, active. The cat is actively going and sitting on the table. Or the table was sat upon by the cat. The table is being passive. It's sitting there and just the cat happens to it, yeah? The active voice is shorter, it's sharper, it's more concise, it's to the point, it is more factual, it is active. The passive voice, on the other hand, it takes longer, it doesn't really know what it wants to be, it's just, it means I have to read more words to get the same meaning. I just don't like it in a technical thing, right? Rhetorical flourishes that are really useful when you're doing verbal communications are not so useful when you're doing written communications, again, because it's more stuff to read to get the amount of meaning, the amount of fact, the amount of truth out of it that you really want. Yeah? Getting the mix is, again, practice. I have historically had a bunch of trouble with this. It took me a long time because my written style is very conversational. I write if I don't have any restrictions on what I'm writing, I'll write like I'm talking right now and have a lot of fun doing it. Apparently people quite like reading it. It's not, however, what you want in a well-written technical paper, technical report, thesis, lab report, test report. It's not the right style of written English.
Again, it's sort of just getting experience in all the different types.
In the same way you wouldn't rock up to a job interview wearing footy shorts, a blue singlet and thongs, you have different styles of writing for different applications.
Yes, I suppose actually building on from job interviews, we've actually had another question from the audience. When you're in an interview and you can sort of feel yourself starting to ramble, how can you refocus, get back on track, and just do that without just being really abrupt?
Yeah, fair.
I feel like a lot of people are wanting to know that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Ooh, that's a toughie. Yeah, there's a few ways. You can be too abrupt for words and just stop yourself off dead. Awkward. Not what you want. You can trail off, which makes you seem indecisive and that you don't really know what to do. There are some active ways you can do this. I know someone who has in the past had good success by turning it into a question, as in they considered themselves rambling for a little bit, got to the end, looked up and did the little bit of a self-reflection facial squinch and said, "I'm sorry, did that answer your question?" As a way of stopping themselves dead to make sure that they stopped and that they also made sure that the interviewer knew they were paying attention, knew that they needed to answer their question and needed to so the interviewer also knew that it was important to the person they were interviewing, to my friend, that the question had been answered, that the information that needed to be conveyed had been conveyed and understood. That's one way of doing it actively. If you can finish off the sentence in a way that doesn't have the traditional way a lot of Australians end a sentence when your voice goes up like this and it sounds like a question, yeah, please don't do that. That's it comes across as being very unsure, very uncertain, very nervous speaking, for all that it is a very common thing in a lot of Australian dialects. That's also a thing not to do. Eye contact is good. At the end of something, if you're feeling like yourself rambling, dragging yourself back to look in their eyes is often one way of stopping yourself from continuing on.
I suppose then, on the topic of interviews still, what, in your experience, are like the top 3 worst things that someone can do in an interview?
The worst thing someone can do in an interview is not be prepared. Yeah. If you get to the interview stage, you're doing well, and you will never get to an interview stage and have no time to prepare. Spend a couple hours online finding out what you can about the people who are interviewing you. If all that is up there is a fancy website with a nice graphic because they're of the Apple uber minimalist style of graphic design, that doesn't really help. But the people who'd be doing interviewing, they would have some online presence of some form. Find out what they do. Find out who works there. Often you can find this via the Teams part. Find out what they've been publishing in various technical parts of the technical press. Find out if they've got new blogs where they might have mentioned something randomly about work. Prepare yourself so that you know you have a decent idea about what it is that the company does, so that you can then talk about it intelligently during the interview. Okay, so not being prepared, that's one clanger. Another one is, and I've not seen anyone do this myself, but there's the not being dressed professionally. Sure, I'm with a startup. Startups tend to have a much laxer dress code, but if you're going in for an interview, you dress up a bit, right? It's how you dress up, that's up to you. But at the very least, some manner of corporate camouflage is important. And if you've been a poor uni student for rather a long time, you may not actually own a suit. You may not own interview clothes. In which case, I'd recommend hitting up the Vinnies, hitting up the local op shop, and seeing what they've got in suits. They won't fit the best. They might be of a style that's 20 years out of date because someone was cleaning out their closet because this is a suit they had when they were a much younger man, much slimmer person, doesn't fit them no more. But this will still be you're not dressing to impress, but you're dressing to show respect. So it doesn't matter how clean your jeans are, doesn't matter how many fashionable rips they have, they're still jeans. You probably shouldn't wear them to an interview. They're your everyday wear rather than I'm dressing to show someone respect. I'm dressing to show them that I value their time enough to make myself moderately uncomfortable, because let's be honest, no suit is as comfortable as jeans, really. Similarly, the office shoes ladies wear, they're just not as comfortable as they really should be.
No. Especially in an age of stand-up desks.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Okay, so that's 2. third clanger I've seen in interviews. It's not so much interviews, but actually submitting resumes. Some people don't put cover letters. So the resume is, okay, this is what I've done. This is what I could bring to you with my qualifications and experience. The cover letter is, here's who I am. Here's something a little bit describing how I got to where I am, why I thought why I saw the position being advertised, and why I wanted to go for it. It's especially interesting. You'll see some people doing the all noise, no signal, motivated, good communicator, attention to detail on a resume, and there's no cover letter. That's odd. So sometimes you'll see attention to detail is misspelled, and that's always something I found hilariously ironic. But that's just me. Cool. So it's three. Yeah.
Yeah. There we go. Yeah. So I suppose nowadays, you can apply for jobs online, but a lot of it is, we're all told, networking is very important.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose, just in your experience and your opinion, what are some of the things that someone could do at a networking event to impress you, and then some of the things that just you could not stand?
Cool.
Or just would make you a bit...
Things I can't stand is people interrupting each other, especially at networking events. We're all there to have a chat after a day's conference, often. And so we've all been sitting down. We've all been. For me, I have a terrible problem at conferences. No matter how fascinating I find the talks, I'm in a warm room. I'm sitting down. The lights are low. There's someone speaking in a soothing voice, and I find it puts me to sleep. So I have had to have a lot of coffee during the day, and so I'm a little bit wired, and I want to talk to people and find out what's going on in the industry, in the community, in the profession, and just have a chat with people. And if people come in and attempt to dominate the conversation via talking over people, no, that's not cool. Similarly, being rude to the folk wandering around carrying the wait staff, the people who are working at the thing, they're there to spend a few hours on their feet, taking care of you. The least you could do is be polite, right? Things that impress me, people paying attention and listening rather than thinking about the next thing they're going to say. This shows that you're actually there to learn rather than there to be seen. This is something I find quite important. A lot of people at these things are often there to make an impression via networking, and so they think that their side of the conversation should be what is going to make this person remember me, what's something I can say that's going to really impress this person, rather than, so what's the conversation about and how can I contribute to the conversation that builds it for everyone. If you do enough of that, everyone's going to remember you, and for the right reasons.
Yeah, I imagine that would happen quite a bit. A lot of people go to networking events and you're aiming to network. It's almost like the goal is not quite networking, it's to have a conversation, and the network comes. Yeah.
And you build networks through these conversations, through these shared experiences, through these shared memories. You want to make sure that they're the right experiences and memories, and you do that by making sure that you have a good conversation, that you tell a good story, that you don't jump in the middle of somebody else's conversation. If you see an opening in a conversational circle, by all means wander over, see if and stand there politely, and if no one is opening it because they're at the limit they want for that conversation, gracefully move on. Don't try and butt in. Most of the ones I'm in, if I see someone who obviously wants to get in, I'll step back into the side and bring another person in. If the number of people in the conversation circle is getting too big and too unwieldy, I'll help to split it into a couple of smaller bits so that people have as much conversational value for the amount of time they've got available to them, to make sure that all the conversations are flowing as well as they can, and that people can make the connections that they feel they need to at this event.
Yeah. I suppose then that was really insightful, actually. Yeah. I suppose everyone, like I said, gets lost in the idea of networking, and no one actually ever teaches you how to network.
Yeah, it's like the old saying of, I can't take the time to sharpen this axe, man. I mean, have you seen all the trees I've got to cut down?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose there's always the question in interviews of tell me about yourself, and sometimes tell me about yourself in one sentence. Do you have any tips on how to answer that?
I've never actually had that asked to me at any of the interviews I've done. I haven't done a lot of interviews myself. To explain that, yeah, sure, I did aerospace engineering. Yeah, sure, I wound up with honours, but I wound up with the lowest grade of honours they give out at the University of Sydney. Anyone out there who has a solid credit average, study hard and you can be me. Yeah, part of that was I had to move house at the end of my coursework semester in my honours year, and while I didn't fail anything, getting these heavily weighted subjects in the low 50s didn't do wonders for my average. But the whole tell me about yourself and doing so in one sentence, it's really difficult because it's hard to sum up an entire person in a dozen, 2 dozen words. It's really difficult. You can try and game this, but if you're being interviewed by someone who does HR for a living, they'll probably see through the game. It's probably not a good chance to try it. So don't answer with what you think they want to hear. Be honest. How do you feel about yourself? How do you see yourself? What hobbies do you have? See if you can work that in there so that you are not just a cog, you're also a person who can be part of the team. In a lot of companies, they'll often look at team fit and cultural fit, because if you can't stand the people you're working with, everyone's work efficiency just goes down. And at the end of the day, everyone's there to get the job done. The management wants the job done, and so having the best fit for the workplace culture is important.
Yeah, it's almost like the point of the question isn't to actually. I mean, yes, they do want to learn about you, but it's also just to check if you're fit.
Yes.
Have you asked that question in interviews? Because I imagine you've probably done them.
I've done a couple.
Yeah.
I haven't asked that one myself. What interviewers are often looking at is not just what you answer, but how you answer, how you hold yourself, how you carry yourself while you're answering. Also, reading between the lines sorts of things. What aren't you talking about? What are you skirting around? All these things that come out of a lot of management psychology, which I haven't done a lot of because I haven't needed to, but it's a rich and fascinating field all of its own. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. I suppose it's almost time to wrap up, but I'll just take one more question. Suppose, do you have an active social media account on your journey to where you are now? Like a personal social media account on your journey to where you are now? If so, did you actively curate it? Yeah. Did you actively curate it to present a certain image? Do you think this has affected the way that investors or employers might perceive you?
Yeah, that's a toughie.
Yeah, especially a bit of a tough one to give you with only a few minutes left.
So,
But
like a lot of people, I do have social media accounts. The one that's more, as does the business. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter. We don't use it a lot. Mainly we use it when we reckon that the something worth talking about. I've got my own personal social media accounts, and they're basically me. They given the time I was at uni, they don't really cover my undergraduate days, which could be a good thing, because like a lot of undergraduate students, I was rather rowdy in my youth. But yeah, Facebook only became a thing while I was an undergrad, and I wound up getting some requests via email from a mate, a very good friend of mine, who was an exchange student who wanted to stay in touch, and was like, this friend is asking me to get on Facebook, and eventually I clicked, okay, sure, and then Mandy just stuck around because it's best of organizing party invitations, right?
that's really what it's used for now.
And it comes and goes as a way of curating video content, media content, staying in touch with mates, organizing party invites, and the like. Actively curating it, not so much. I don't post as much as I used to, mainly because I just don't have the time. When you're a PhD student and you've got a lot of time to wait while data points accumulate, you spend some of that time just reading around various things. You might find an interesting article, you post it up, or something amuses you, a news article on ABC, BBC, whatever, and so post it up. Not so much actively curating it, but a bit of it is curation via apathy. As in, I just don't have the time to do a lot of postings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you reckon that, if you were hiring someone, would you look at their social media? Like, even if they were if they were someone with a social media account that was kind of relevant, or even wasn't relevant, had a decent number of followers,
well,
would that be impacting?
It's the classic thing that a lot of that happens to a lot of interviews is, sure, you've told us what you want us to know in your resume and cover letter. What extra can we find out? Let's look for you on Google. Do you have a Facebook account? Do you have a LinkedIn account? Are you on Twitter? What do you post on these sorts of things? What can we tell about you that would help us to make the decision, yes or no? Yet kind of what various intelligence organizations of the past 100 years could only dream about, and makes me, a little bit nervous with just how much of everyone's data is out there available for anyone. But this is one of the things that's common in the world today. People will look for your social media and try and find you.
Yes. Yeah. I suppose it also comes back to what we were saying earlier about certain questions in interviews. It's a way to gauge if you fit in.
Yeah.
It's another way in to find out how you fit. I suppose we might have to wrap it up there. It's been a really, really great conversation. Thank you so much for taking time out of your really busy schedule.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Before I wrap up, I would just like to quickly let people know that we've just put another event for our next live Q&A up on Facebook now. It is going to be a careers in aerospace panel where we're going to have people from startups, defense, all areas of potentially any sort of job that you could be looking at in the future, and asking them about their experiences. So that is going to be, it is on Facebook now, but it is going to be Thursday, the 20th of August at 6:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. And I really hope to see you guys there. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to Paddy for taking time out of his day, and have a good rest of your night. Thank you.